Border disputes are a bit like furries. People think they are strange and maybe dangerous, and yet somehow there are a lot more of them than you would expect. Indeed, there are currently hundreds of border disputes across the world, which are usually extremely complicated and difficult to solve. This is why seeing one being resolved is rare and feels quite refreshing. Exactly that happened in the case of Hans Island, which was disputed between Denmark and Canada until the war in Ukraine happened. How did the war lead to the end of this dispute, you may ask? Well, I'll explain, but there's another question we must answer first. What the hell is Hans Island? The island, which is also known as Tartupaluk in the local Inuit language, is located here, right between Canada and Greenland, which is officially an autonomous part of Denmark. The island itself is fairly unremarkable, an inhospitable and frozen wasteland about the size of 200 football or soccer fields. It has no significant deposits of natural resources we know of, nor an exceptionally strategic location to offer. The population is exactly zero, and the only people who occasionally visit the area are the local Inuit hunters who have inhabited the surrounding region for millennia. What makes Hans Island special though is not the territory itself, but how the dispute over it was fought, namely with flags and alcohol. Some of you connoisseurs of obscure geopolitical fun facts may know this already, but Hans Island was the site of the infamous Whiskey War. No, not that sort of Whiskey War. The Whiskey War was often described as the world's friendliest geopolitical quote-unquote. It's not really clear who started it, but most sources I've seen trace the beginning to the Danish back in 1984. Why does this always happen when I mention that year? Anyways, back then a Danish delegation, led by the Danish Minister of Greenland, was sent to Hans Island in order to plant the Danish flag there. Before leaving, they left a note and some Danish schnapps in anticipation of a Canadian retaliation. And soon enough, the Canadians responded by sending a delegation of their own. They removed the Danish flag, replaced it with the Canadian one, left a note, and then properly disposed of the Danish schnapps, only to leave some Canadian whiskey on the island instead. And so, somewhat of a tradition was born which saw the Canadians and Danes taking turns in sending small delegations to the island, which would respectfully replace each other's flags and leave some of their own national alcoholic beverages behind. While this sounds like all fun and games, there were also times when the Canadian and Danish governments got a bit more serious with each other about the issue. Increasingly, both sides were sending navy vessels to patrol the area to bolster their claim on Hans Island, which some feared may end up causing a serious incident. One such potentially dangerous occasion happened in 2005 after the Canadian Minister of Defense visited Hans Island. In response, the Danish did the only sensible thing, sending a heavily armed navy ship to the island. As you might have guessed, this created a fairly tense situation, but fortunately the two foreign ministers of both countries were present in New York at the same time and quickly met and de-escalated the situation. Maybe this whole ordeal would have been avoided if they would have just used this video's sponsor, NordVPN. Captain, we are approaching Hans Island. Alright, start Operation Nord. Sir, we registered the IP address of a foreign ship. It's surely those damn Canadians again. We are checking its IP address and it's Mexican, apparently. What? Zoom in on the crew. Sir, these are obviously Canadian, not according to the IP address. With NordVPN, you too get to hide your IP address from curious Danes as well as the rest of the world, and lets you appear as if you're accessing the internet from 59 different countries, all while incidentally learning about world geography through NordVPN's lovely interface. Is your favorite show not available in your country? NordVPN has you covered. Do you want to get the best prices on flights and travel tickets? NordVPN has you covered. And on top of that, NordVPN can also help you to protect your data, for instance by blocking various web trackers. If you go to nordvpn.com/politicswithpaint, you can get an exclusive NordVPN deal for a 2-year plan, plus 4 bonus months for free. Even better, it comes with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. By doing this, We will also be supporting this very channel. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video, and remember to go to nordvpn.com/politicswithpaint to get this amazing offer. But now back to Hans Island. After the whole Navy ship incident, the Canadian and Danish governments decided to put a formal end to the Whiskey War. All flags were removed from the island and all symbolic visits were stopped to avoid provoking more incidents in the future. But why was Hans Island disputed in the first place? The issue really started in the early 1970s, when Canada and Denmark began delineating their maritime border in the Nares Strait. To spare you the boring details about continental shelves and stuff, they basically agreed to put a border through the middle of the strait in accordance with international law, which worked perfectly, except in one place, Hans Island. Because the island was located right in the middle of the Nares Strait, it was unclear who was the rightful owner, and so naturally, both Canadian and Danish officials claimed the entire island for their respective country. But why didn't they just split it, you may ask? Well, on the one hand, compromising is considered something for losers in the world of border conflicts, so national pride surely played a role. And on the other hand, both governments suspected that the island could become somewhat useful in the future, even if it isn't now. For example, if something really valuable would be found near or on Hans Island, or if its geographic position would become valuable in case of the Nares Strait becoming an important trading route due to rising global temperatures. For the 50 years of the conflict's existence, the Canadian and Danish governments regularly discussed the matter. Although several proposals were drawn up, they were never implemented, as the motivation for finding a solution was just not there for a number of reasons. Firstly, the issue was not very pressing, since it was unlikely to escalate into an actual conflict. Not much was at stake, and Canadian-Danish relations were also stable and friendly. And secondly, politicians in Canada, Denmark and Greenland occasionally liked to use the issue for political gain. Because of this, the situation would have probably not changed for a long time, if not for a shocking geopolitical event which occurred in 2022. You've guessed it, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The invasion sent shockwaves across the world, particularly in the West, where many didn't think such an escalation was possible. In the wake of the invasion, officials from Canada, its Nunavut territory, Denmark and its autonomous region Greenland began seriously discussing how to solve the dispute quickly and fairly once and for all. The goal was simple: to send a signal to the world, and especially Russia, that territorial disputes can and should be resolved peacefully. And so they did. In June of 2022, it was agreed to split the island in almost half, with Denmark getting 60% and Canada 40% of it, as the new border will follow the natural split in the rock. It was also agreed that the native Inuit people who live in northern Canada and Greenland will have free access to both sides of the island, so that the border would not disrupt their lifestyle. Despite the very obscure nature of this conflict, this new agreement made international headlines when it was officially announced. But did it also have the desired effect of showing the world, and especially Russia, how disputes should be handled? Well, yes and no. On the one hand, Hans Island has become one of the rare examples where two countries resolved a border dispute in a peaceful and cooperative manner in accordance with international law, so it would definitely be a good example to follow. But on the other hand, it took Canada and Denmark half a century and one of the biggest geopolitical crises of the 21st century to finally settle an issue over a frozen, uninhabited and practically worthless wasteland that most people didn't even know existed in the first place. Considering that, it seems that Canada and Denmark are not exactly in a position to lecture other countries about how to deal with border disputes, which are many times more complicated than Hans Island. Whatever you think of the symbolism behind Hans Island, one thing is clear: there is now one fewer border dispute in the world, solved through peaceful means and in accordance with international law. Let us hope that it won't be the last. A big thank you to my channel members and patrons Justin, Colanax, Steven, Curtis and Rasmus for supporting this channel. and thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.